Lessard doing what he was supposed to do was based on fear. There's a lot of us that fear God, and actually Scripture encourages us to have a healthy fear of God. Not an immobilizing fear, but a kind of fear that recognizes His holiness. A kind of fear that encourages us to get activated, like yeast. To get activated means to move with that recognition of God's awesome nature, and not to let it immobilize us, but to move forward in His grace and mercy. And that's the key today, because the real fear is the fear of risk. The real fear we have is taking a step in a direction we had not intended to take or didn't even know needed to be taken. I started PCA 20 years ago. It was a risk. It still is a risk in many ways, even today, because the Lord keeps bringing and broadening new opportunities for ministry for us. And it changes from one season to the next. And one of the things that is important is to take risk and to adapt. Because the gospel is not static. It's not like a thing, because it's like a person. The gospel is the person of Jesus. And people are not static. And Jesus is constantly moving in new directions and opening new avenues of ministry. Just when we think we know what we're supposed to be doing, and we probably have been doing what we're supposed to, Jesus moves into a new direction. He never stayed in the same city. He moved from place to place. And he encouraged the apostles to move with him so that they would learn that one of the important elements of the gospel is that Jesus is moving you, that the Spirit is leading you. As a matter of fact, all of Luke's gospel is connected to Acts, and Acts of the Apostles is the movement of the Holy Spirit in the church and in us. Jesus is not like a static icon. We have nice little statues around and pictures, and they represent a certain part of Jesus' ministry, a particular place where he went through his death and resurrection. All of that honoring those moments in his life. But those moments are not over. Jesus is moving in your life to understand, to recognize you and I, to know that we are in the same process of being perfected in his grace each and every day. To live in a new creation means to be committed to change. And to recognize the importance of change. Now, not every change is good. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, well, that was a difficult change, but out of that change, something good happened. Well, that was good. No, that was bad. We oftentimes look and we put human value on something and say, well, this was good or this is bad change. With the Spirit of God, it's all good, no matter how bad it seems to us at the moment. And not to say that it's not difficult, not to say that change can be determined by our own, sphere of influence, because oftentimes change comes at us unexpectedly. Jesus says that we can harness that today in the reading, because the other two servants were willing to take what they had and make it available to risk. And that meant change. Because when you risk something, you don't know what the response is going to be to it. When you risk your money on a car, it could be a lemon, right? When you put your money in a 501k or whatever it is for your, the interest, you could lose it. It's in the risk that we discover our character. Entropy leads us to bury things and leave them behind us and to not take risk. You know, the guy was gone a long time. The servant who had not taken any risk could have reevaluated the situation and said, you know, he's going to come back, and I will have nothing to show for it except what he gave me. The purpose of our discipleship in the Lord is to enter into the challenge, the opportunities, the change of ministry. And this is not always easy. Do you think we find ourselves at times resistant? Yes, we do. Because change is unpredictable. It's something that is hard for us, human beings, particularly within our sphere of influence, or the people we know. We want things to be stable without change. And yet there's not one person in this room that's not changing. Some of us are getting older in terms of maturing, going through school and graduating. Some of us are dealing with changes in our own bodies in terms of our health. Some of us are going through ministry formation and development. All of those things put us at risk. And it's what we do with it that matters. Are we going to bury ourselves in the past and try to hang on to dear life for the things that we don't like and try to avoid those things? Or are we going to enter into the experience of God's journey of grace? And that means to be willing to risk the unfavorable opinion of others, to sometimes be misunderstood, to be questioned by people who have little faith, or perhaps in society as a whole, to stand up for what is right when others around us are willing to capitulate and do what is easy and what will cause less stress. I don't see Jesus doing that. I see Jesus facing his accusers. I see Jesus dealing with the Pharisees. I see Jesus healing the sick. I see Jesus doing all kinds of things that normal folks would say, that's a little weird. And that's a little outside the boundaries of what we should be doing. As a matter of fact, the Pharisees wanted to have a predictable Messiah that they could control. And you know, they found one after Jesus, and they followed it. And all of Israel was wiped off the earth. Sodom Bar Koba. And in 70 AD, Rome came and wiped them out. And they all went, what was left, went into different parts of the world. So, we want to follow the Master. We want to follow in the footsteps of the plan that God has for us in our life. Because it will always produce, through the risk, it will produce something. It will cause us to act in such a way as to be in union with Jesus' unpredictable nature, if you will. Now, I'm not saying that we don't want security. Human beings need to know those things. But we cannot be a slave to it. We cannot be holding on to our past and saying, well, I can't do that. I've never tried that before. That's too difficult for me. We're called to follow him, and therefore to risk with him. To take what is difficult for us to even understand and to make an attempt and a trial of some way. To do something new, to try something new. Doesn't mean we're always going to succeed. But we're going to risk it. That journey for me personally is kind of constantly, I'm constantly aware that just when I think, I was talking to the Lord the other day and I was saying, I can't figure this out right now, but I'm going to follow you. Faith is when you can figure it out. Risking is when you can't see what's going to happen, when you can't necessarily anticipate what the future will bring, but trusting in the midst of and taking the risks necessary. We are never going to move into this new pattern if we don't risk something. And that's what we are called to do. Risk those things that oftentimes we hold on to and say, you know, I've got to have it this way, I've got to have this money, I've got to have this opinion, what good opinion of people, I have to this, I have to do this, I have to get this, I have to do that. What is Jesus inviting us to do? To celebrate his love. That when we take the risk, we will make the produce. When we take the risk, we will learn something. When we take the risk, the future is open to us. We don't have to be staying in the static patterns of the past, burying our talents and hoping that someday we might at least hold on to what we have, but rather with the anticipation of God's purposes in his plan in the future, and acting as if the future, which it is now. And risking, taking the